You have a phone with 40 apps on it, a streaming library with more shows than you could watch in 10 lifetimes, every song ever recorded sitting in your pocket, and somehow, by 9 p.m., you're bored. So here's a question nobody asks. What did humans do before any of that existed? Not medieval humans, not the Romans. Go back further, 100,000 years, 200,000 years. No writing, no music, no art, no language the way we'd recognize it. Just a person, sitting there with absolutely nothing to do. What they did next explains where creativity comes from, where religion comes from, maybe where you come from. But first, a real question scientists actually argue about. Did boredom even exist back then? For a long time, the assumption was no. Survival ate every hour. Hunting, foraging, building shelter. No downtime, no room for boredom. That assumption turned out to be badly wrong. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe spent years living among the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer group in Tanzania who still survive almost exactly the way our ancestors did, using the same kinds of tools, the same kinds of shelters, the same rhythm of a day with no clock in it. What he found broke the assumption completely. The Hadza worked, on average, around 15 to 19 hours a week. Not a day, a week. The rest of the time, they sat, they talked, they rested in the shade, and did nothing in particular, for hours, without any apparent urgency to fill it. Which means the real question isn't whether ancient humans got bored, it's what they did about it. Start with the obvious answer. They played. That sounds harmless. It wasn't. In a cave in southern Germany, archaeologists found a small ivory figure, half lion, half man, standing upright on two legs, carved with a level of detail that still surprises the people who study it. It's roughly 40,000 years old. Researchers who tried recreating it with period-accurate stone tools, no metal, no shortcuts, estimated it took over 400 hours to carve. 400 hours, no practical use. It didn't cut anything, it didn't hunt anything. It couldn't be eaten or worn for warmth. Someone sat there, for what would have been weeks of afternoons, patiently shaping ivory into something that meant nothing for survival and everything for something else entirely. Necessity doesn't build a 400-hour statue. Boredom does. Music tells the same story, and it goes deeper than most people realize. In multiple caves across Europe, archaeologists have found flutes carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory, some over 40,000 years old, with finger holes spaced precisely enough to play actual notes. One flute, found in a Slovenian cave, is even older, and some researchers argue it may not have been made by humans at all. It might be Neanderthal. If that holds up, it means an entirely different species of human, one that never developed our kind of language, was already sitting somewhere, bored, turning a bone into an instrument. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin argues musical ability may be older than language itself, that our brains were wired for rhythm and pattern before they were wired for grammar, which means someone, possibly not even fully human in the way we mean it, invented music the same way everyone else on this list did. With nothing else to do and a free afternoon. But boredom didn't stop at art and music. It invented something stranger: imagination. You cannot be bored without a sense of time. To feel bored, you have to know this moment is dragging, that something else could be happening, that the future exists and might be better than right now. That's not a small thing. That's the first evidence of a brain that can picture things that aren't in front of it. A dog waiting by the door isn't bored, it's just waiting. It has no story running in its head about what else it could be doing. But a person sitting by a fire 30,000 years ago, with nothing to do, starts wondering. What's past that mountain? What happens when the fire goes out for good? Deep inside Chauvet Cave in France, early humans crawled hundreds of feet into total darkness, past drop-offs, through narrow passages, carrying only torchlight, to paint lions and horses on walls no one would ever live near. Nobody needed those paintings to eat. Someone needed them for something else entirely, and every question religion has asked since, every question philosophy has asked since, started the exact same way. Someone was bored, and their mind wandered somewhere it didn't have to go. Modern research backs this up directly. In a well-known study on boredom, researchers gave people the dullest task they could design, simply copying numbers by hand, and then tested their creativity right afterward. The bored group outperformed everyone else. Boredom doesn't shut the brain down. It forces it to generate its own material. And that wandering mind didn't just turn toward stars and questions about death. Eventually, it turned toward each other, and this is where the story gets a little uncomfortable. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, the same researcher behind the famous idea that human social groups naturally cap out around 150 people, studied what people actually talk about when nothing important needs saying. His answer, roughly 2/3 of all human conversation is gossip. Who did what? Who said what? What happened to someone you both know? It sounds like wasted breath. Dunbar argues the opposite. Before language, primates bonded through physical grooming, picking through fur, one friend at a time. Grooming doesn't scale. Language does. Suddenly you could bond with 3 people around a fire instead of 1. 10. You could talk about someone who wasn't even there and build trust with people you'd never once touched. Civilization didn't start because we needed to plan better hunts. It started because a bored species sitting around a fire discovered it could talk about each other, and that turned out to be the most powerful glue evolution ever produced. So here's where all of it lands. 40,000 years ago, someone bored carved a lion out of ivory. Around the same time, someone else, maybe not even human in our narrow sense, turned a bone into music. People crawled into total darkness to paint animals nobody needed painted. And around 1,000 different fires, people sat with nothing to do and started asking questions nobody had answered yet, about death, about the sky, about why anything is the way it is. Some of those questions became religion, some became science, some became art, and some became you, lying awake at midnight with your phone against your chest, thinking about absolutely nothing. Here's the part almost nobody mentions. Psychologists have a name for what happens when boredom gets erased completely: cognitive overload. When every second is filled, the brain never gets its quiet moment to actually process anything. The default mode network, the part of your brain that switches on specifically when you're doing nothing, is the same network responsible for creativity, self-reflection, and empathy. It only activates in the silence. We spent roughly 300,000 years learning what to do with that silence. Then we built a machine that fits in a pocket and fills it instantly, and we've barely put it down since. But every time you set the phone aside and let a moment sit there, empty, and let your mind actually wander instead of reaching for a screen, you're doing exactly what that person by the fire was doing. The same thing that carved the lion. The same thing that shaped the flute. The same thing that crawled into the dark with a torch just to paint something on a wall. Boredom never held ancient humans back. It's the reason they became something more than animals in the first place. And it might still be waiting to do the same thing for you, if you ever let it.